was coming across campus one day, and a couple of maintenance guys were in a deep hole. They clearly had a water line break. So they were down in the mud and the water and all this stuff. And I come up in my suit and my wingtips up to the edge of the hole, and I look in and I say, "Hey guys, what are you doing?" And they say, "We're educating students for Christ." And I said, "That's it. That's exactly what you're doing. You're educating students for Christ by making sure not just the water works, but how you do it and the attitude you take, because these students are watching you as you walk by."
Hello, folks, and welcome to the Disciple Dilemma. I'm Dennis Allen. Let's have a conversation about leadership and discipleship. We've got the right guy in the room, Dr. Roger Parrott, one of the leading university presidents in America today, and the president of Belhaven University. And Roger has been tagged as one of the 10 most visionary educational leaders in 2021 by Education Magazine. But his rap sheet goes beyond that. He has served in leadership roles with the Lausanne Movement, the Mission America Coalition. He was even the chairman in 2004 of the Forum for World Evangelization. He's been on the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities, long, high credibility group, and an author. Latest book we're going to talk about today, Opportunity Leadership, Stop Planning, Start Getting Results. Roger, when we think about this book, Opportunity Leadership, folks, you can see the book up on the screen right now. Stop planning and start getting results. I'm a corporate guy. I'm a turnaround guy. I go into corporations that are busted and broken. And one of the first things that I do is I say, boys and girls, we've got to have a really good plan that gives us a trajectory for the next 2 or 3 years. So I pick up this book written by Roger Parrott, and he starts saying, stop planning. Roger, come on, what's going on, man?
Well, it doesn't work. That's what's going on. If long-range planning worked, we would do it. But 4 years ago, everybody who had a long-range plan has their long-range plan busted because nobody had COVID in your long-range plan. But it's amazing when COVID hit and horrible things came out of COVID and just tremendous. And I face it at home. My daughter was one of the earliest COVID people in the country, and she's still in bed 3 years later with COVID long. So I understand
Really
the terrible side of COVID. The good side of COVID is look what it did for Christian organizations who had to be responsive, who had to adjust in a hurry, who had to get creative in ways they never thought was possible before. When they didn't have a plan, they came up with all these great ways to continue their ministry, to advance their ministry, to do things they never thought they would do, but their plan had been holding them back. So it's a great example of why planning, there is a better way than planning out and projecting a future.
Okay, so you're a third generation higher education administrator. Is that right? Grandfather and father, and now you?
I am. Yeah, this was my grandfather's desk that he worked at back in the 1930s. So,
wow. Okay, so what would your dad and your grandfather think about this statement, Roger, about this planning thing? I mean, surely they have a little disappointment here, right?
Hey, they did, and I did. I was a long-range planner for 20 years. I did it. I had the blue ribbon committees. We appointed them. They went off into some secret place to plan, to make the plans, to lay out the vision for the future, to lay out the goals. And for higher education, I mean, for ministries, I can do it too, but for higher education, I can tell you the 5 goals they'll come out with before they ever meet. There's going to be one about enrollment. There's going to be one about strengthening the faculty. There's going to be one about their mission. There's going to be one about the money, which is the one they're really after. And then, by the way, we're going to do something for students. And we're going to have those 5 goals, and that's what's going to come out. And nothing's going to dramatically change out of that because we're homogenizing our strengths and we're not capturing the opportunity. So what happens is we become focused on this plan, and God brings opportunities into our path, and we go, well, we can't do that. We're on this plan. We got this plan, and we prayed over it, so we know it's the right plan. And so we can't do what God brought to us, and you want us to go this direction because we got a plan. And this plan becomes an iron grip on ministries that keeps them from being free to capture God's best. And it's not that planning's bad. And I get that. And I get that most leaders listening to this are not going to stop planning tomorrow. But there is a better way. And I think planning, it's okay, but we shoot for a whole lot less than what we could do. But more than that, we're missing God's very best by our focus on the plan rather than waiting on God for his leading and opportunities. And what I'm talking about is destination planning. I'm not talking about operational planning. We do operational planning. What we don't plan is where God's going to take us. And so we use this image of we want to be a sailboat prepared to catch the wind of God and go wherever God's winds takes us, rather than a powerboat that goes where we think God wants us to go and ignores the wind. Let me just give you a real quick example. We were into this about 10 years. We've been doing it for 20 years now. So about 10 years into it, I wanted to test it. And so I went to my board with a piece of paper and it said 5-year plan. And there were actually 72 items on that plan for 5 years. And but here's some of the big ones. I said we're going to increase enrollment 43%. We're going to raise $21 million in gifts, which for us is huge. We're going to build $31 million in new buildings, which is gigantic. We're going to start 7 undergraduate programs. We're going to start 8 graduate programs. And one of those was nursing. And as I read this plan for 5 years, the longer term members figured out what I was doing. And the plan was for what we did the previous 5 years. That was the outcome. That wasn't the plan for going forward. And I said, now here's the kicker on it. If 5 years ago I had brought you this plan, we would have cut it back by about half, maybe 2/3. And we would have felt pretty good about those as our goals and objectives. And we would have worked hard. And at the end, we would have said, God blessed it. And isn't it wonderful? But we would have missed so much because we were gripped by the plan rather than the opportunities. It came out, I thought, I better test this again. I did it again with my board after the book came out. And there wasn't one item on the 5-year plan going back that would have been even on our radar 5 years before. Not even one. It's amazing what God will bring when we free ourselves from this grip of planning.
So Dennis, when you were turning around companies, how much did you depend? I always depend on God showing up in Steel Founders Society because otherwise we'll be broke. How often did you have to depend on God just showing up when you were turning around a company?
Roger, I hope you can see the kind of abuse that I take on this podcast with those setup questions like that. Have you stopped beating your wife lately? I mean, could you come up with something a little more obvious? Yes, Raymond, it's amazing how if you are a believer, you should step into every endeavor of your life with the Lord God Almighty before you as you go with this. But I would also say an interesting piece of this conversation, which Raymond's doing a great job of baiting out, is it must be difficult, Roger, as it has been for me with investors, to attract funding in turnaround situations when I'm trying to attract equity and debt to come in to help out a struggling business. If you don't show them where you think the future is going, how did your university, how did your constituents and your donors kind of react when you go with this, hey, guess what, we're not going to do anymore?
It was a slow progression of letting go, and you do it by showing them success of the past. But when you look back, the landscape looks a whole lot like what looks ahead. But now we see it on the other side of that, and we see how God led and how God brought opportunities and directed us through that. And we say, wow. So when we look ahead for the yikes, we have to look back to get the wow. Now, in a corporate setting where everybody's not a believer, that's tougher to do. When you've got a ministry setting, Christian college, a church, some other ministry where everybody's on board of trusting God, that's easier to communicate. But again, it was slow steps of showing progression, slowly letting go of that, making decisions faster, building the culture behind what's necessary to let go of planning. You can't do this and not have something take its place. You've got to build a culture that allows people to be comfortable with that. And the core of that culture is understanding your mission so absolutely well you never stray from it. I think one of our biggest challenges now that we've really embraced opportunity leadership is we get so many opportunities that come to us, we can't do them all. And so we have to figure out and know what really fits our mission and what doesn't fit our mission. So I look at mission, gifting, and capacity. Those are the three things I'm measuring. And we've got to know that mission inside and out and never get tempted to go something that's sort of like it, but not like it. We've got to go mission, gifting, and then what are we good at? And I know what we're really good at and other things we're not good at. So we're going to do the things we're good at. And then capacity. Sometimes we can take stuff on and other times we can't. God wants us to trust him completely for our future.
How do you decide to stop? What's clear about something that looked like a great idea, fit the mission, you thought you had the capacity for, and now you go, oh crap, we need to stop?
I think first of all, it takes a lot of communication. But I'll give you an example. We were the leader of Christian colleges and branch campuses after Indiana Wesleyan. We had 11 branch campuses across the Southeast. And this fall, I closed the last one of those. But the challenge Christians have is, when we start something, we say, God's called us to this. We pray over it. God's directing. God showed up. God's leading. Here we go. And then 3 years later, it's not working. And so what? Did we miss what God was saying?
That's interesting. I'll give you a really cute little story and try and be short enough that Dennis doesn't cut me off, which is a challenge. In Mississippi, they test rocket engines. When NASA comes to test an engine, they send 30 engineers. They take it up to the performance requirement and it survives. That's a successful test. When Tesla sends a rocket engine down, they send one person with it. When it meets their minimum requirement, he says, push it until it breaks. They want to know what's going to break so that they can really do the engineering to know what to do next. And so I think we need some of that mentality within our Christian ministries. We need to do it until it breaks and see what we need to change.
We do. And we need to not try to bring such cumbersomeness to decisions where you bring 30 people for what one person could do. We slow ourselves down so much by the process we create. And that's one of the things we've been able to break free from.
And that really raises the other topic that Dennis really wants to plow into. And a lot of the things you said really strike me as saying you have a really elegant and complex understanding of discipleship, because you're not talking about one-on-one mentoring. You're talking about a peer-to-peer relationship with a whole range of colleagues that are working together to advance the kingdom of God and learning from each other, not just a sort of teacher, mentor, mentee kind of relationship. Is that how you visualize discipleship?
Very much so. And I visualize that as my role in the university is how do I facilitate the people who are doing the real work? And how do I help them? And how do I help them grow and develop in the Lord? And how do I help them grow in their skills? And how do I give them opportunities? Well, to me, I got to start by knowing who they are. And I think if you don't care about them as a person, you're not going to be able to they're not widgets. They're not factory line workers or just do this, do that. You got to help people really feel trusted and cared for and embrace, which I do. And one of my favorite examples ever, and I wrote about it in the book, was I was coming across campus one day and a couple of maintenance guys were in a deep hole. They clearly had a water line break. So they were down in the mud and the water and all this stuff. And I come up in my suit and my wingtips up to the edge of the hole. And I look in and I say, hey guys, what are you doing? And they say, we're educating students for Christ. And I said, that's it. That's exactly what you're doing. You're educating students for Christ by making sure not just the water works, but how you do it and the attitude you take, because these students are watching you as you walk by.
Folks, we're talking with Dr. Roger Parrott, the president of Belhaven University and the author of Opportunity Leadership, Stop Planning and Start Getting Results. When we come back, we want to roll this over and start talking about how this leadership thing connects to this discipleship thing so that we can figure out this whole opportunity thing that Roger set us up for. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back to the Disciple Dilemma. We're talking with Dr. Roger Parrott, president of Belhaven University and author of the fabulous book, Opportunity Leadership, Stop Planning, Start Getting Results. So Roger, who did you write this book for? This has to be somebody in your mind when you wrote this it's a fascinating target. Who was it you were thinking about the most?
Well, there were specific people. I learned long ago in writing a fundraising letter to a mass audience, write it to one person and then it works for everybody. And so I did think of very specific leaders as I was writing various parts of the book, because I've seen what they've gone through. I've seen their struggles. I've seen their hurts. But obviously university presidents have been very responsive to the book. One of the best, I had a president call me shortly after the book came out. He said, I stayed up all last night reading your book. He said, now I don't feel guilty for what I'm doing and not have a plan. He said, you gave me words and you gave me the understanding of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I wrote it for that. I wrote it for pastors that I see overwhelmed by a process, and often with people who've got a lot of opinions because they got little pieces of long range planning from this and that, and they just create a jumbled mess, and the church just gets around feeling frustrated and inadequate about themselves compared to others. I wrote it for a lot of ministry leaders. I've worked in over 100 different ministries of all sizes, and I know the struggles they have. And they all feel like they have to have the boards are the worst on this. And that's also who I wrote it for, because boards want this planning, because in their business world, they have these long range plans. And so for the board to feel like they've accomplished something, they want a plan too. And so they put the pressure on that. And so how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that? I wrote it for them as well.
It sounds to me as if part of the passion that you have in this process really is aimed at how we get discipleship on the table through this opportunity leadership system. How does discipleship fit into this Christian college? I've just got to imagine it's a homogenous universe. Everybody's walking around in total love with each other. It's just so easy peasy. How does discipleship fit into this thing, Roger?
Well, I wish it was. If it was, that'd be interesting. Christian higher education is the single best tool of discipleship the church has. There is nothing better. I mean, a church can say, we're going to have discipleship meeting on Monday night and come, we're going to read this book together and it's going to be great. And they may come and they may not, or they may skip a few sessions and whatever. Not with me. We got them. They're captive. For 4 years, I got them. And we're going to take a Christian perspective on their calling. We're going to take a Christian perspective on history and on literature and on understanding theology and the big issues of grace and truth. We're going to take a Christian perspective on how you play on a football team and how you live in a community. We're going to model that. And sure, they're going to make a whole bunch of mistakes as it goes, and it gets sloppy at times, and that's okay. That's life. And so, but they have a place where people are going to pick them up and build them up because God handpicked them to come here. And if God handpicked them to come here, there's a reason, and we're going to pour our lives into them. And so our curriculum across the board is built on a Christian worldview. Every course, whether it's a math course or a Bible course, is going to be built on a Christian worldview of how is God leading in that discipline, in that area of our lives, and really focused on their calling. We start with their calling. Freshman year, first week, what's your calling? Understand that calling, understand what motivates you, understand what's gifted you, and how you're unique. And when you can get that, then you got a foundation for building discipleship. The way I often explain it is we're interested in 4 C's in how we go about education: character, caring, community, and Christ. And when you can really build an institution that is clearly called to discipleship, to me, there's nothing better. There is absolutely nothing better in the world.
We have shifted culturally to thinking that our children need to make a decision for Christ instead of being taught from the earliest age that they belong to him, and their only choice is to reject the truth that he's our reality. How do you deal with the change in culture where we told children that they're supposed to self-actualize instead of serve Christ and love their neighbor? How are you making that transition with the cultural changes we've had?
Well, we have the same problem of biblical illiteracy. We're in the Bible Belt, but it doesn't mean they know the Bible. They just know how to wave it sometimes. So the foundation on which we're building often has to be basic. I speak in every chapel. We have all all semester. I spent all semester last fall on the Beatitudes as a ladder of fulfillment, not a ladder of success, and how each of the 8 Beatitudes are built on each other. And you can't go up that ladder unless you do the ones underneath it. And in fact, I even preached on an 8-foot ladder. It kind of scared me to death when I got up. If we can help this generation understand those bigger issues, because they're learning from snapshots on their feeds, on their phones, and they get little pieces of this and little pieces of that, and it doesn't create a whole of anything. And we've got to help them with that. And I have great hope in this generation. I'm not saying, oh, this generation's lost. I think this is a great generation who's very creative. They just connect differently. They live differently. They operate differently. And, they'd often rather do it through their phone than they would to talk to your face. And that's okay. That's okay. Let's figure out how we help them to grow in that. But
Roger, let me ask this question about the culture around Belhaven. One of the greatest challenges I face in the business world is getting people to realize what their real mission is, and then bringing the culture around that mission rather than letting the culture dictate some other mission and drag us away from the mission. Mm-hmm. What would you say was your greatest challenge at Belhaven from 95 forward in the culture that you inherited versus the direction you felt the Lord was calling you to take the university?
Yeah. Well, the culture I inherited was in the middle of a shift of process of this institution really returning to its evangelical roots, being serious about serving students in the Deep South, which means students of color in addition to white students, not just one or the other, and increasing the academic quality of the institution. And so we really set out on a challenge for that. And it started pretty low. And so God's opened opportunity after opportunity for that to happen. We hire very carefully in who we bring in. We get people who every time we have an opening, we leapfrog in our mission, in our commitment, in our quality, in those kinds of things. And through the years, God's blessed. We built a whole bunch of buildings. This institution's grown from 900 students to over 4,000. We're a doctoral level institution. And I think, as you said in your introduction, we're the tops in the arts. I mean, we compete with students going to Ohio State and USC and Florida and Juilliard. But I think we've never taken our eye off the mission. We always knew why we were here. And that mission was core, and we weren't going to get diverted by other stuff. And it's really tempting to get pulled off on other things. I mean, we could get pulled off into the culture wars. We could get pulled off into a political stance. We're not going to let that happen. God didn't call us that. There are others who are called to that, and that's fine. Go do it. But that is not our calling. Our calling is quality education taught from a Christian perspective that will equip you for the challenges of the world ahead. And so
I have a friend who's a provost at a Christian university, a prominent Christian university, and one of the challenges he inherited was a faculty that was about 40% without a Christian worldview. They were hired for their resume and not for their worldview. Was that your challenge then in 95? Did you face that?
Thankfully, a lot of that work was done before I got here. And I'm thankful it was, and our provost got beat up for it, and our board chair got beat up for it, and it ran a couple of presidents away, but they got it done. We were probably at 90% by the time I got here. And the last few were a challenge, but but that is not unusual at some Christian colleges. And I encourage families as they're looking at Christian schools to really ask the hard questions and really get to know the faculty and look at really what's driving them, and is it that mission? When COVID hit, we decided to give every student a free master's degree if they stay and graduate. And so it worked so well, we're keeping that. And so our students come and they're getting a free master's degree in addition to what they get. And then we also did another thing. Just for COVID, I was worried about kind of the downturn in the arts and families nervous about putting money, their student in the arts. And I said, let's let them do a double major. And so we went from like 5 students doing a double major to now about a third of our students are doing a double major, and they do it for free if they go into the 5th year. So we said, don't do a double major because you're afraid it's going to take longer. If that pushes you into the 5th year, there's no tuition the 5th year. And again, those are things you don't plan. Those are things that just happen. But I think in really building disciples, if you don't fully equip somebody for what God's called them to do, you've missed your opportunity as a person responsible for discipleship in their life. That decision about double major, that took 3 weeks from first thought of it till we implemented it.
Wow.
The one about the free masters, we did that in less than a week. And I think that's an important message for leaders, because I mean, I've had opportunities to do some other things,
Sure.
and God directed me to stay here. And what I found every time I looked at something and I stayed, God did something really remarkable at Belhaven after I stayed. Every single time. And I think if leaders will dig into a place and they'll stay and they'll really invest their life in it, they will find much more fulfillment than jumping around for the next one that's a better title in a better place and a better salary. No, God can really, I mean, there are reasons to move. I don't want to say somebody shouldn't
Sure.
move, but if you do feel called, there's something, as you found and I've found, really terrific about just investing in one place.
How would I evaluate colleges and understand that Belhaven really has that commitment compared to other colleges that are Christian colleges and
Right.
have Jesus on the picture in the front office, but really have diluted their Christian convictions?
Well, the real quick one on Christian colleges is, first look, do they have a Bible department or a religion department? If they have a religion department, run the other direction.
I really wish you could be a little more enthusiastic about this, Roger, but okay, we'll take that. As no good deed goes unpunished, sort of our closing round question I toss first to Dr. Monroe, and then I'll let Dr. Parrott have the final say on this. I'm curious, Raymond, from your point of view, as we look at Western Christianity today, particularly in the Gen Z and the millennial arena, what do you think the biggest challenges facing discipleship are today?
It's the failure of our generation to communicate that their contribution to their community is their identity, not their self-fulfillment. And because of that, we've lost both the communities and their sense of self-sacrificial mission to those communities. So when they go to school at Belhaven, they're not trying to figure out how they fit in to make a contribution. They're trying to decide what they're going to get out of it and how it's going to make them happy and fulfilled. So that would be my sense of the biggest limitation that we face. And so what Roger's been saying they require at Belhaven is really trying to allow the students to grow into that understanding and that identity.
Dr. Roger Parrott, who is a consulting guru, the president of Belhaven University, the author of Opportunity Leadership. What say you? What do you think the biggest challenges are facing us in discipleship today in the Western Christian world?
For the younger generation,
Mm-hmm.
they think we don't believe in them. They think we think they're hopeless, and they're not. They just are different. They communicate different. They connect differently. They have a different calling. They don't want to go to the corporate office. They don't want to do what mom and dad did. They want to do it a different way. They do have a lot of self satisfaction, as Raymond, you talked about, that's driving them, but how can they use that for good? Often can do that in teams rather than individually, but they think we don't believe in them. And when they know that you do believe in them, you want God's best for their life, I find them very responsive. Challenge is how to get their attention sometimes, because attention span's short, and they've been taught that. And we used to have a generation that was identified by their attention span of 22 minutes of a television show. I mean, these students, they flip like crazy and they communicate like crazy. And I'll see them sitting at a basketball game with their friends, and instead of turning to talk to their friends, they text their friends sitting next to them. That's how they communicate. That's how they connect. That's how they create community. That's okay. Let's just help them to get the big picture of what God's going to do in their life, and then let them express it in the way that they're comfortable.
Dr. Roger Parrott, we are so grateful that you be with us today to talk not only about your experiences at Belhaven University as the president there for all these years, but also as the author of Opportunity Leadership, Stop Planning and Start Getting Results. Thanks for being with us today.
What a treat for me. You guys make this fun, really fun. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
How would folks get to know a little bit more about what's going on at Belhaven, and how would folks get to know a little bit more about Opportunity Leadership?
Well, belhaven.edu with one L, belhaven.edu for education is the easiest way to get it. And opportunityleadership.com is about the book. And I think you can get a chapter there and some other stuff. And so those would be probably two easy ways, or write me at president at belhaven.edu. Comes directly to me. Nobody filters my email. I'll see it directly and be happy to correspond.
There you go, folks. You'll see all this on the screen while we're talking as well, both the websites and the conversation in the book cover with Opportunity Leadership. Raymond, thanks for being with us today and helping to raise my mediocrity up a little bit so Roger didn't have to just laugh too much.
Oh, it was a delight, Dennis. Roger's a delightful friend.
Folks, please consider helping us get the word out that discipleship has been hacked. We're going to need leadership in the Christian world in many ways similar to what we're hearing Dr. Roger Parrott talk about. Leadership to help us change the culture so that discipleship can thrive again in the Western world. Take a look at our website. You'll see all the images up on the screen, but www.thediscipleddilemma.com will get you right there. Please consider following us and supporting us to help us get the word out that discipleship has been hacked, and we want to get back to the biblical model Christ gave us. As always, thanks for listening.